1958 movie Vertigo, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, set in San Francisco. James Stewart is Johnny Scotty Ferguson, a retired cop. Kim Novak plays the lead role of Madeline stroke Judy, two women who look identical. And Barbara Bell Geddes plays Midge Wood, a woman who's interested in Stewart, but he is rather aloof to her advances. So, what do we have? Well, we have a psychological thriller, and this is now regarded as one of Hitchcock's best. The opening scene sees Ferguson chasing after a felon on a rooftop, and he then freezes, and his agoraphobia starts to take over, and he starts to experience vertigo. A fellow officer tries to rescue him and inadvertently falls to his death. This leaves Ferguson shell-shocked. He does manage to get rescued, but it leads to his retirement from the force. He's considered a risk as he's unable to respond to any alert which involves him going up flights of stairs. This fear of heights becomes significant. A friend of his approaches him and asks him to do some private detective work by tracking his wife, who he appears to think is behaving strangely, and he's concerned that maybe she will commit suicide. Ferguson reluctantly takes on the job and follows her. She visits a flower shop, buys a certain bouquet of flowers. She then goes to a cemetery and spends considerable time looking at a gravestone of a woman who died at the age of 26. He also visits an art gallery and spends a lot of time looking at a portrait of a young woman, a young blonde woman. And she also visits a shop. This combination of events starts to build a story of intrigue, and Ferguson looks into the person whose name was on the gravestone and finds out that she had a volatile marriage, a separation, also had a child, and was deserted by her husband, which led to her suicide following her shame and loneliness. This is significant. On another day, he follows her and she goes to the Golden Gate Bridge, and she manages to fall in the river, and Scott manages to rescue her and he takes her to his home. She can't recall anything of what happens, but she's also 26 years of age, and a relative of hers has committed suicide at that same age, which heightens the anxiety about her mental health. And the problem is that Scotty also has his psychological problems, and he becomes infatuated with Madeleine to the point of obsessiveness. They embark on a sort of romantic relationship, and they go out to a Spanish settlement, which is significant with regard to the woman who's on that gravestone. Scotty wants to retrace what he thinks is a dream, a recurring dream that Madeline is having, involving this deceased woman. And they arrive at this settlement and head for the church, and there's a bell tower. Madeline says goodbye and frantically runs into the tower in the church. Scotty tries desperately to follow her, but then he starts to experience vertigo as he climbs the stairs. And the woman Madeline, appears to fall out of the bell tower to her death. At the inquest, Scotty is completely shell-shocked, having failed in his duty to look after her, and also the love that he had now got for her. There was the grief related to that. The verdict was given as suicide from an unsound mind. After this, the plot thickens, and Ferguson spends a period of time in a mental sanitarium before being released after about a year, and he then wanders round the streets trying to search for Madeline. He does come across a lookalike, and he follows her to her apartment room, and the relationship starts between Scotty and the girl Julie, who has a striking resemblance to Madeleine. He then tries to shape Julie in the same image as Madeleine by buying her clothes that are identical, by getting her to dress her blonde hair identical. She was originally a brunette. And this leads us forth to the final conclusion, which I will not digress and tell you about here, as it will ruin your enjoyment. Just to say that Hitchcock, for many of his movies, would not spill the beans at the end, would not tell you the twist in the plot, but on this occasion he does. The film is a brilliant, slow psychological thriller. Love obsession is looked at, as is mental breakdown. We see how much this affects Stewart, and how much it affects Novak. It's a very gripping piece of cinema. The music is absolutely vital to ratcheting up the tension and the action. I would thoroughly recommend this, and it's one of my favourite films from 1958. It's called Vertigo. It's directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and it stars James Stewart and Kim Novak.